If you have an empty house, so there's no planets, you have an empty house, you have an empty sign, it can mean a couple things. It can mean, one, that your attention in this lifetime, the lessons that you were learning, are more heavily concentrated in the places where you do have planets. It does not mean that that empty area is not important, because it still tells you information about yourself. So I'll give an example. I always do my 6th house in Sagittarius, so I'll pick a different one. So I have 12th house in Gemini, no planets. That doesn't mean that I can't extract something about myself on the personal level. So I could say, all right, well, my isolation involves me wanting to chat, wanting to think, wanting to talk, wanting to learn. If I am ever I always say this, I will never be bored, because it doesn't matter if I'm by myself, I will entertain myself. I will learn something. I will read something. I will write something. That's very indicative of that type of a placement. It also can be suggesting that part of my undoing, if you will, is that I'm in constant pursuit of wanting information and wanting to learn and conversing and connecting with people. So then it could be harder in some situations if I am totally in a vacuum for some extended period of time, unable to talk, unable to connect, that could be a problem for me. So those things, I say them because that's ways that you can interpret them. And that's also ways that are true for me. So just because I have no planets there doesn't mean that they're not important. And again, if you are interested in having more of a deep dive into your chart, I have 3 different beginner levels of understanding, peeling back the different layers of your natal chart. Yvonne, I was just thinking about retrogrades as I was born under 6 of them. Haha, yeah. I just want to make sure that you're clear that you don't want to count the nodes, which are the little horseshoes. Those don't count. So if you're in your count of 6, those should not be counted, because they're always in retrograde, because they're just calculations. They're not like a real planet in retrograde. So if you're counting those, subtract your total. How accurate does time of birth need to be for astrology? Very good question. So it depends. So ideally, you have your exact birth time, date, location. Then it's accurate. Then it's 100% accurate. When you have the accurate info, it is accurate. If you have an approximation, like you're like, oh, I'm not exactly sure what time I was born at. I think it was sometime around like 3:30. I don't know, but I know like that's what, my parents said or something. And so you're just kind of guessing, and you just put in, that it was sometime in the afternoon, and you just put in that time. It'll give you an approximation. Now, the reason why that might matter is, like, as an example, I was just saying, in an hour from now, Mercury is going to be in a different sign. So over the course of a single day, let's say you put in the calculator 3:30, but that's not right, and you're actually born at 6:30. That's only 3 hours off, so you go, oh, it's not that big of a deal. And it technically isn't that big of a deal. However, maybe in those 3 hours, you have the planets changing signs. You could have more than one planet changing signs. You could have the moon changing signs. And also your ascendant, your rising sign, shifts every couple hours. So depending on the time that you were born, like, your rising sign is totally different. And that, I think, is obviously the sun sign is important, but I kind of think the rising sign is more interesting to look at and of more significance in a lot of ways. So if you don't have an accurate rising sign, it's like, it's kind of a bummer, because also it totally orients your chart. So when you're looking at the zodiac wheel, when you know the rising sign, it's telling you like how the chart is turned. So it orients it to say, okay, your 4th house is going to have Libra. And so all of a sudden, if your chart is quote unquote wrong and it's oriented in a different way and you have now your 4th house is Scorpio, well, that tells you very different things about you. And you might look at it and go, well, that doesn't really make any sense. And so that could be an indicator that what you have is not right. So when we do these different natal chart classes or when we do readings, like I've had some people who they didn't know their birth time. Some of them ended up finding it, thank goodness, before the reading. So it just makes it easier. So what I would try to do is like loosely try to build it for them. So I would ask them questions like, okay, it looks like, the moon did change signs on that birthday. So then I might just ask them some questions ahead of time. And so it'd just be like some multiple choice questions. And then based on their answers, it's like, okay, so it seems like they're leaning more towards this sign, even though they don't necessarily know what I'm asking. I'm not saying like, so what's this about your moon sign? I'm just like asking them a question that would be an indicator that could suggest what their moon sign is. And then that could give me, okay, well, if they relate more to this one, they're more likely born in this portion of the day. So then that narrows it. And then from there you have, okay, well, then what are the different rising signs that could be available during that time? So you can back into a chart, but the really short answer to your question is like, if it's not accurate, you won't relate to it because pieces are off. And so then the interpretation is going to say one thing, but you're like, well, I don't feel that way. Versus if it was another, you're like, oh, that is spot on. Or like, that is something that feels uncomfortable, but I know I needed to hear that. But you can do readings in the standard practice. So if you don't have any idea of when you were born, the standard practice is to just put 12 noon. Because it just gives you smack dab in the middle of the day. It gives you something as far as a baseline. And you can go from there, but it means that your rising sign might be totally wrong. Odds are much higher it's wrong. 50-50, unless the moon didn't change signs on your birthday, then your sun could be, or your moon could be wrong. And then if any planets happen to change signs, those could be wrong. So it depends on the specific day that you were born. There could have been a lot of transits that were happening. And if there was a lot of activity, then it is less clear of like, maybe what moved. Twins that are under a minute apart. So curious. Oh my gosh, that would be awesome. I would love to do that. So what I will tell you that I have heard with twins in particular, and something that is a super commonly asked question is like, oh, well, like, how can the astrology chart like be relevant at all? What if you have twins? They're not the same person. It's like, of course they're not the same person. They're individuals. And just from the purely astrological perspective, let's say that their chart is like 99% the same. Like something that will be different is the planets will have moved. So if they're a minute apart, like you could have a planet that is at a slightly different degree point. You could have a planet that stations retrograde within that 1 minute. Like there's so many, the moon changing signs, the ascendant changing signs. So that 1 minute really could matter as far as how the chart looks. It looks pretty similar, but the couple changes are meaningful. Separately, with every sign, with every planet in those respective signs, we have high and low vibration. So somebody that is in the high side, high expression of Pisces, creative, intuitive, compassionate, super kind. The lower vibrational side, escapist, avoidant, gullible. Like, so you could have twins that both have the Pisces placement, but they lean into the high or low vibration consistently, or they flip flop. And some of that just tells you about like their individual growth. And of course, you can look in other areas of their chart to determine like what are the suggested lessons or things that they could be healing or working on or wounds to tend to, et cetera, et cetera. And so it does account for the fact that, well, they are going to be different people. And that's totally fine. You wouldn't interpret it like 100% in the same way. You have a transit that's happening. Maybe it hits one chart a little bit differently because, yeah, if they're born 1 minute apart, you could still have something happen in 1 minute. But if it was 15 minutes, if it was an hour, if it was a few hours, like, yeah, they could have like a noticeably different chart depending on exactly what was happening and moving during those 15 minutes or a few hours. 2 minutes apart. Oh, wow, so many twins in this chat. And they were different, maybe DNA personalities. And that's exactly the other point to make is the free will piece. So some of it has to do with individual experiences. So the two kids go to class. They're in different classes in school. They have different experiences in those classes in school, even though they're at the same school, even though there's the same student body at that school. And so that is going to be shaping, it's going to be activating the high, low vibration, the things that they learn, the things that they internalize, how they choose to express based on the specific placement that they have. So you can have something that's adaptive or maladaptive. And it just creates all of these subdivisions. So that's why they don't end up being the same person, even if their charts look 99% the same. And I also have synastry readings that also could be really interesting, especially when you're talking about twins. So synastry readings is when you're looking at a relationship. So you're comparing two charts. So I've had several parents do this. So it's like their chart with their kid's chart, but you could have like your twins' charts compared to each other. That would be super interesting. So yeah, things to think about. But if you have any questions or curious about the different services that I have, feel free to. Yeah, so if you go to the link in my bio, you can go to my website and my email is there. Advice on creating boundaries. If we're talking about it from the astrological perspective, that's what Saturn represents is boundaries, 100%. So you could, just really in general for the collective, if anyone's just trying to understand, you can just follow Saturn around the zodiac and be like, hey, what's it doing? Where am I being asked to develop boundaries? Where am I being asked to reevaluate them? We currently have Saturn retrograde, so it's like, okay, it's doing a rewrite. It's doing a check here of like, hey, how are my boundaries? It's back in Pisces, entered last month. So it's in this area. We're reevaluating our emotions, our intuition, the Piscean area of our chart. So we are doing that again. More details. You want to watch my overview on that from September. Saturn is about like the big life lessons. It feels like tough lessons. It's tough love. But it's wisdom is what it is. Like, hey, it's so important to put the boundaries in place. As somebody like myself, like I have in my natal chart, Saturn in Pisces, which is telling me that for my entire life, I have to really think about the boundaries that I have in this space. Am I oversetting or undersetting boundaries around connecting to my intuition? Check. Creativity. Check. With other people, like yesing other people. Also looking at which house it's in. For me, it's in my 9th house. So it's about travel and teaching and learning. And like, are you like, I gotta be the best student? Yes. So many different iterations. So you can learn that just looking at your natal chart, like what that placement is. It can give you the pattern. And then what you can identify is, okay, so knowing that this is where my Saturn is in this house, in this sign, what does it need to be supported? What does it need to create healthy boundaries? To not like over boundary here and like be too strict and too rigid, too intense is the wrong word, but like harsh. How do we like soften that a little bit? And sometimes it's looking at other areas in your chart, and sometimes it's just having an understanding of the sign. So what is it that Pisces needs? We were talking about the nostalgia, the coziness. If Saturn is putting a restriction, it's putting a tough boundary on like keeping other people out rather than connecting to the softness and tenderness that Pisces does want, That's part of the negotiation. It's like, when's the Saturn going too far? When is it nice to just like be connected and like, let's be happy and let's get along versus like, I have to go do my thing over here. This is too much. So it's going to be different manifestations for different people. And of course, I'm only giving this Saturn and Pisces example because that's one, where it is now, and two, what we're talking about for this week. And three, I can speak to it because I have that in my chart. Every time I look at something on my chart, I'm like, yep, feel so seen. Yep. I do have a course. Actually, it's a 2-part workshop that's on my website. So for anyone that's interested in getting that 101 understanding of astrology, and I do expect to add more classes into that, but as of right now, I have 2, and they are explaining the 12 zodiac signs around the wheel, across the wheel, all different relationships with them, and the 12 houses. So if you want a really solid baseline, that also comes with an interactive worksheet. So you can follow along, give yourself a nice handy reference guide. So I'm trying to develop as many resources as possible, and especially ones that like work nicely with each other so that you can be so much more clear about a baseline. So I do coaching. I have one-off readings for a variety of types, and then I also have different workshops that are on my website and guides that you can turn to. So Nicola, feel free to message me on Instagram or social media or email if you want to figure out, like, based on where you're at, like what's the best resource. Um, happy to point you in the direction for like what it is that you're trying to understand or what it is that you're struggling with. Yes, yeah, current chart is different than natal chart. So that's a whole other thing. So again, if you're just like not 100% sure where to look, or you want to have more of a baseline, definitely let me know. And I'm happy to just be like, here, look at this thing, or this will be the resource that will help, or live one-on-one will help, or, whatever it is, or look at this blog post that I wrote. So I have a lot of different options. So Carrie, if you have those outer planets, it means that you are likely relatively similar in age. It's basically what that means. So because they are more slightly generational planets, it's a narrowing down of like, okay, you're probably born within, a 10 to 15 year period of each other. You could fall anywhere in that range, but that's really what it's indicating if you have both of those planets in the same sign. Also, if it's in a later degree, it could be that one of you is like right at the end and one of you, it's like right at the beginning or something. So like I have that, like I have some outer planets that are different than my sister, but she's only 2 years older than me. So it means that like we just happen to be born like right on the transition. But if they're in the same sign, then it's like, okay, you're like in a certain range of years from each other. So that's why when we say collective planets, we're talking about like any people born with like Pluto and Scorpio. You're like, okay, these people have this signature. They have these aspects of their life and their upbringing that shaped them in this very particular way. Same thing with Uranus, same thing with Neptune. So there's some thread of commonality that you have with people in these little sub-generations. But the rest of your chart could be completely scrambled because you're born a different day, a different year, a different location. And then, how your chart's oriented, like which house it's in. Like if the two of you are saying, oh, we have, Uranus and Neptune in these signs, but they're in totally different houses, completely shifts what we're talking about. So yeah, there's definitely a little, oh, there you go. So you're only born a year apart. So exactly. But how it presents, like how those energies present for you could be completely different, even though they're in the same sign. Because if your ascendant is different, then your house orientation is different. The exact lines of the houses, if you use Placidus, are different. So they could be in different spots, even if you have the same rising sign. Yeah. New besties. Yeah, it is. I do think like the outer planets like don't always get like a lot of daylight. because they are collective, and I do try to talk about them in these classes and give them a little attention because I think they're really, I'm just someone who I like to reflect on things, and I think that they're they're prime for that. They're like really great to think about years, decades of life